This is the Norris Group's Real Estate Investor Radio Show, the award-winning show dedicated to thought leaders shaping the real estate industry and local experts revealing their insider tips to succeed in an ever-changing real estate market. Hosted by author, investor, and hard money lender, Bruce Norris.
Hey everybody, it's Aaron Norris with the Norris Group. Well, for the last couple months, we've really beat up accessory dwelling units. I don't expect that we'll hit that again until SB 13 has some movement. It did move forward as of July 1st, so we'll see what's next. It's still in the House, and we'll wait to see what happens. But we covered it from so many different angles, so we'll take a break on that. And then last week, we covered AirDNA. If you're doing vacation rentals or thinking about doing vacation rentals, it's going to be a really important tool for you. At the very end of June, I was part of a conference by the National Association of Real Estate Editors. As a creator in the real estate space, I was recommended to join. And every year they put on the spring conference that's really interesting. It's basically 3 days, and it's built for journalists, international journalists that cover real estate. So there's a panel on iBuyers, commercial real estate, industrial, you name it. There's about an hour session on any real estate topic that you can imagine crammed into 3 completely packed days. This is my second one. And I thought I'd try something a little bit different and share with you some of the highlights because it was so content rich. It was really fascinating. So it started out with a panel, and it was moderated by Beth DeCarbo. You might recognize her. She does real estate for the Wall Street Journal. And she was interviewing Julie Melander, and they were covering the top 10 issues facing residential and commercial real estate. And I'll just go through the list and cover a few bullet points. So number 1 was infrastructure. And in a survey that they did to their members, more than 50% of the responding survey takers of the counselors ranked infrastructure as one of the top 3 issues affecting the real estate industry. So everything from roads to bridges, tunnels, railways, flooding, the natural disasters. They're just really worried about crumbling infrastructure, thwarting economic growth, and just daily lifestyle and living, quality of life issues. So it's really interesting to watch markets like Austin and Colorado, markets that have really boomed since the downturn, and things like transportation take a lot of thought and a lot of leadership, and a lot of those markets have not been investing in mass transit. So the last time I was in Denver and Austin talking to people about traffic, it's just exploded, and their answer to it has not been hasn't been anything. So no light rail, no subways. It's just, we're getting behind. Number 2, housing in America. The range of population facing difficulties in securing an appropriate place to live extends from those who are homeless in big cities, small towns, and rural areas to millennials and Generation Z members entering the workforce in thriving cities where apartment rents have soared, and there's just no way that they're going to be able to afford a property. Income is definitely not keeping up, so access to housing in America has definitely shifted. Number 3 on their list with weather and climate-related risks. So the National Center for Environmental Information says that there was something like the average insured loss between 1980 to 2018 is 19.3 for major weather events, and we've had lots of big hurricanes. In 2018, the losses from California topped $12 billion because of all the wildfires. More than 13,000 insured homes and businesses were destroyed. So I'm still expecting to see some pretty ugly insurance bills come out of that, but they're worried about weather and climate risk. Number 4, the technology effect. Technology is going to drive the capital markets, use of space, leasing, brokerage, valuation, and building operations, and technology may be making the actual location of a business less important. So everything from Internet of Things or IoT, big data, analytics, artificial intelligence, robotics, blockchain. I think it's going to catch a lot of people off guard. I think 5G has been really interesting to follow. At the Consumer Electronics Show I got to go to in January, I was really excited to learn about 5G and when it was going to be rolled out, just to realize that what's rolling out right now is not true 5G. It's just sort of an elevated 4E+. But when it does roll out, when you're talking about internet internet connection that's 10 to 100 times faster than what we're experiencing now, it's going to be game-changing for a lot of things. We won't just be cutting the cord on cable as we know it, cable TV. It just changes a lot of things. The technology effect, too, you may have seen some of the articles I've written for Think Realty magazine on the education and technology and where that's going. I think education is ripe for disruption. If you haven't played around with LinkedIn Learning yet, for basically $300 a year, you have access to thought leaders on almost any topic you can imagine. You take a course, and after you're done, you get a certificate that's attached to your profile on LinkedIn, and recruiters can search against it. So why not be able to take some of the best training from the thought leaders in any category if they produce it once at a very high professional level and it's evergreen, meaning it will last and it's not so timely it would go out of date quickly? I mean, that could be a game changer, especially when it comes to the university market. Number 5 on their list of concerns, the end of cycle economics. We're now in our longest boom market, and so everyone at the event was talking about a recession, but it was interesting to hear nobody was really saying when. I've seen charts from a few different events this year where the majority of economists think that by the first quarter of 2020 we will have one, but it's sort of a wait and see thing right now. Number 6 is political division. Political gridlock and infighting just isn't helping get anything done, from climate change to population migration, infrastructure, and housing. It's just really hard to get people focused, especially with the way politics work, especially on issues that really have to have a long-term leadership in place to really make it happen. Like we're seeing that in California with the bullet train. It's frustrating to watch other countries install this needed infrastructure, and we just can't get it done, and the cost overruns are absolutely insane, and we might end up pulling the plug on something we've already spent billions on. It's really frustrating to watch. Number 7, capital market risk. As risk tolerance, perception of the market's position in the cycle, and taste and preferences for space change, so does pricing and demand. And there's a tremendous amount of liquidity in the market. There's almost too much money, and banks are competing with unregulated debt funds. So private equity transactions are down, and an indication we're nearing the end of the cycle. Number 8 is population migration. People move because of business conditions, tax policies, technologies, disasters, including floods and extreme weather events. And in the very big picture, the census record shows that since the first population tally is 1790, the population centroid, or the imaginary spot on the map that represents the spot at which the American population is perfectly centered, has shifted to the west and to the south. And a look at demographics change since 2010 suggests this long-range trend will continue uninterrupted when the 2020 census is tallied. Another good book on that, as we've said a lot of different times, is Big Shifts Ahead, and it's one of the reasons that we are in Florida. And by the way, we are doing a second Florida trip. By the time, if you're listening to this, chances are we will have already sent an email out about it. If you're interested in tagging along, it's going to be, I believe, August 15th and 16th, and information will be on the calendar. So big cities are prospering, like California, the Pacific Northwest, Florida, and major Texas metros as part of this equation. Secondary cities are also adding population, so areas like Denver, Salt Lake City, Atlanta, Nashville, Minneapolis, Charlotte, Raleigh, Kansas City, and Greenville. In many of the latter areas, renewed suburbanization is complementing the downtown revivals. So downtowns being a core asset, I think, in the way boomers and millennials are wanting to live. And in the book Big Shifts Ahead, he talks about the suburban environment. It's sort of access to those downtown cores, but with a suburban feel around the edges, access to jobs, shopping, all that kind of good stuff. Up until a decade ago, the consensus projections had the U.S. populations growing to about 440 million by 2050. That has been pushed back by as much as 30 million, a very significant deceleration. Partly the reason for slowing anticipated growth is constraint on immigration. So that's always an interesting thing. We're just not having kids as often and as many these days. So that's going to be something very interesting to watch over the next decade. Capital is gravitating disproportionately to major market. So the top 10 metro MSAs tallied $266 billion of real estate invested in 2018, though they had just 33% of the U.S. population. So interesting things to watch on population shifts and money, where it goes. Number 9 in CRE issues are volatility and confidence. The levels of commercial property investment appear to be reflecting some uncertainty concerns on the market. Overall investment volume has been down year over year, and there is an underlying trend of decelerating rent gains in income producing property. This is going to be really interesting to follow in the commercial space because, especially in retail, I'll get to that in a little bit, but there was a lot of conversation about malls. We have too many of them, we've overbuilt, and how the role of the mall is shifting. Year over year, single-family housing construction is down 9.4% as of April 2019, and down 5% for all residential construction in the U.S. The U.S. Census Bureau also reported that non-residential construction volume is down 8.5% for commercial properties as of in April. So, the National Association of Realtors survey of members' confidence has also mirrored the Conference Board's poll. So, most states, 39 of the 50, expect price appreciation of less than 3%, with 14 of those anticipating value growth of less than 2%. So apparently we're just really spoiled, and we just really expect higher rates of appreciation, which is partly the reason why we're having affordability issues. Finally, the list of CRE issues is 10 public and private indebtedness. So long story short, just the ease of access to credit and lots of money chasing yield has some people concerned because people have pulled too much at high risk. I have definitely seen that in the hard money lending world. People creating programs that just don't make a lot of sense. I'm watching iBuyers make a lot of very interesting decisions after raising billions of dollars. The stuff that they're buying in California is interesting, to say the least. So I'll end that there, but I think the CRE actually has a report where they spell it out. It's on their website if you're interested in reading more on that. So the hotel sector I'll cover just very shortly. It featured John Keeling of the Valencia Hotel Group, and the moderator was from the Las Vegas Journal. And the hotel sector overall is doing well. They said despite Airbnb, they just can't get as much as they want during peak periods because of Airbnb. So what was interesting at CES, I scored a huge deal on an Airbnb because the hotel rooms at the time were going for $800 a night. And I'm talking about like circus rooms, like 2-star hotels. It's so crowded, and they have an influx, I think, of around 150 to 200,000 people. So Airbnb's definitely put a suppression on those. So it's really scary to think where those hotel prices could have been. Lots for hotel construction has really gone up. So it's getting harder to build. Consumers are gravitating towards new construction hotels. Land, materials, and labor are increasing, so it's getting harder for hotels to pencil overall. And it was really interesting to hear that more hotels are building in condos into the mix on the top floors. So building in some income there to make these projects pencil. And these the condos in those cases are really on the luxury side of the market. The next thing that they covered was Retail Armageddon, and it had Herb Weitzman with the Weitzman Group, and it was moderated by the Dallas Morning News. And this just fascinates me. So 35% of malls will be retrofitted or torn down because of e-commerce. So back when I was in the construction industry in the lighting design field, they were talking about a lot of lifestyle centers right before the downturn. So I thought it was interesting that they were calling, the trend open air centers. So yeah, they're just not indoor malls. Anyway, we're putting the service stores out in the front. Herb says we put the bigger boxes in the back. It's repositioned how these centers really work. Retail companies are slowing down and trying to retrofit their operations to merge digital into brick and mortar. We saw that with Amazon buying Whole Foods and sort of figuring out that mix. And then it's been really interesting to watch Walmart and Amazon. Walmart obviously had all the brick and mortar, but they spent several $billion buying Jet.com, which is a really cool Amazon competitor. If you've never tried, you have to check it out. They have a very cool app. Online stores and Amazon are integrating their online businesses with brick and mortar to various degrees of success. So I haven't seen Amazon roll out a lot of their specialized brick and mortar with those top things that you can buy. It'll be interesting to see how that proceeds. Empty spaces from department stores that close pose a challenge to retrofit because they're multi-story. I want them to create senior housing. Last year at this event, they talked about building more housing into the mix on these retail centers. I thought senior housing would be a shoe-in simply because you have all the entertainment there. I've been seeing gyms at malls more often. So just really creating an experience where you show up and almost everything you need is there would be good. So anyway, new landlords and cutting-edge investors. It was moderated by Palm Beach Post, and it featured David Hicks of HomeBusters, Colin Weil with Mind, which is a property management company, and Ralph McLaughlin of Core Logic. And he's been on our radio show before when he was an economist at Trulia. It was a really interesting panel. Funny, I was coming in from New York City and I lost my luggage, and after the event, I went up and introduced myself to David Hicks of HomeBusters, and I told him I was a hard money lender, and I was in shorts because they lost my my luggage, and he said, "You don't look like a hard money lender." So awkward. Anyway, investor buying activity in the U.S. is at record highs, and the smaller guys are leading the increase. So they're mostly buying starter homes. So, you know, iBuyers came up in this conversation, and I think it's being downplayed a little bit because they have only raised the billions of dollars as of the last 12 months. And now you have new entrants like Zillow and Keller Williams that are getting into the mix, and I know that we're going to see more. So I've just finished doing the research for California alone for our upcoming newsletter that'll probably be released by the time this is out or next week for our subscribers. But I looked at every single transaction from the 4 that are very active in California, including Opendoor, Redfin, Zillow, and OfferPad. I think those are the 4. Yeah, Knock is not really active in California that I can see. What they're buying, where they're buying, trying to figure out the buy box. That came up quite a bit at this event. The buy box being exactly what these iBuyers are after. It's not the big investors and institutions that's driving the market right now, but I think that can definitely change, seeing the kind of money that's pouring into this market. Most investors are going east of the Mississippi and avoiding states like California. Why? Because the numbers just simply don't work. David Hicks was really interesting to listen to. He says that there's only about a 10 to 15% crossover with the iBuyers at the moment. And on average, his franchise ORs of 1,100 now, and they've gone from around 165 in 2009 to over 1,100 different franchisees across the country. They're spending about $7 million per month in marketing, and 50% of those that are flipped actually go to other investors. So they're really just a marketing arm, and they're wholesaling those to other real estate investors that are either going to fix and flip them or hold them as renters. Colin Weil with Mind. Mind is a property management company. We've worked with a similar company out in Southwest Florida called Great Jones. They have their roots in the big institutional buyers, the buy to rent landlords. So they're really just introducing a lot of technology into the property management space. Right now I haven't seen a lot of discounts, but the technology is pretty cool. We'll have to see if the customer service remains there. Some of the other things talked about in this panel: watch out for flipper data. I brought this up. I've spoken to Adam Data and Core Logic. I'm hoping that they will consider bifurcating the data on Wall Street purchases versus Main Street. And the reason why is that Wall Street, like in Phoenix, I think it was brought up that 7% of the sales right now have to do with iBuyers. So as this model grows, their model is on really thin margins, and not all of these iBuyers are fixing the property. They're just offering, speed, flexibility, what real estate investors do, but they're not going after the heavy fixtures. So there's a really quick turnaround, and those will show up in those models because it shows up as a flip because of the time that it resells. So I just brought it up and was hoping that they'll consider doing that, because will be very interesting to watch, because they're operating on such tight margins. If there's a recession, it's going to be ugly. Okay, office space, the future of work, evolving office towers. I won't go too much into this, but it features Chris Harmon with Woodbine Development, John Moos with Hines, and Brian Harrington with Hannah. This is just really interesting to note that they're struggling to create an environment. The workforce is very competitive. People who go into office spaces who are leasing are trying to attract top talent and keep them there. And I guess office towers are one of the ways. It's amenities in those office towers. It was interesting and funny to hear that maybe they've gone a little bit too far trying to mimic, the startup environment with the ping pong tables. So distraction is becoming an issue. So maybe they're going to get rid of the ping pong tables. But across the board, they're looking for variety and flexibility in a workspace, trying to build in green space. One of the developers on the panel was talking about a tire swing in one of the developments. They're mixing hospitality services within the office space. So really an environment where you can eat, you can play, and you can work all within the same building. There was also interesting discussion about parking. A lot of these developers are frustrated. They're going to be developing parking knowing that parking isn't going to be as needed in much just because of a function of being these urban environments. Driving will get less popular because of driverless cars or mass transit, or just less people driving overall because of ride sharing. They just know that they're going to have to convert it, and building a parking structure is very different than preparing a space that's going to have a build out for tenants improvements. So do you invest now? I don't know. They're just going to have to answer that for me later. Disruptors in the real estate space. It featured Todd Tata with Adam Data, Marilyn Wilson with the Wave Group, Chung Ming Chong with Move Inc., and Glenn Phillips with Lake Homes Realty. I'm trying to think if there's really anything really important to announce, but you'll notice that Purple Bricks did pull out as of last week. I'm really surprised. The market is still pretty much a seller's market, especially along the coast in many areas. So a discounted fee for listings seemed like that should have worked. So I was really surprised to see that now. I would have expected that in a recession, but definitely not at this moment in time. So none of these technologies that we'll talk about in the show have been recession tested, so it's always going to be very interesting to watch to see what happens when that occurs. Buyers believe they need agents less than sellers do, yet buyers are still, even the Gen Z and millennials are going to agents. They still need them, but I'll talk about why that might change in the future. Convenience will always win, says Glenn Phillips. It's how Netflix overtook Blockbuster, and residential brokerages that miss that mark will eventually fail. So there's just a lot of push to become technologically savvy. I think you've heard us talk about like Keller Williams investing $1 billion just to keep up with the Joneses, and now put their naming in the iBuyer box. It's just something that these companies are having to do to stay on top. So everything from broker offering salaries and commissions to technology being provided, it's just a reality that we're all going to have to deal with. There was a wellness panel for design. We are creating a design module for our portal. I really believe that real estate investors in the market, because of iBuyers and just where we're at in California, we're going to have to be a lot more focused on creating value in a transaction, whether it's building an accessory dwelling unit or focusing on the design. But you're going to hear this wellness term. So green was, so 5 years ago. It's about wellness now. So building standards for things like air quality, thermal comfort, better lighting and glare control. It's getting really fancy, you guys. So just be aware, you heard it here first. Wellness is going to be a key term in your rehabs and listings, I guess, in the near future. Generation Z, we'll cover this really quickly. Homes.com, David Melee, I think is how you pronounce his name, did some research on Gen Z, so born between 95 and 2012. It is the most diverse group. It's more diverse than the millennials, with 50% being diverse, so other than white. Almost 87% expect to buy their first home by 35, so they are starting early. There's a misconception that they have to have 11% down. 63% of them think that they need to have a lot more down than is necessary. So if you're in a realtor or in the mortgage industry, it's just going to take some more education. What they're concerned about when it comes to home ownership is making enough money to be able to afford to buy a home and saving the down payment, student loans, of course, and having good credit to be able to accomplish buying a home. They want to live close to work, friends, and family, and crime are going to be the top three of the things that they're looking at. As a diverse generation, they prefer to live in diverse neighborhoods that are ethnically and racially diverse. and they just want to be understood. So this is a trend we're seeing when it comes to realtors. Gen Z and millennials are wanting to use realtors, and they'll start using tech, but they are going to people, so just don't screw it up. What they're really wanting is for you to listen to what they want their lifestyle to look like and use the local expert backing them into a home in a neighborhood that's going to meet everything on their list. Food hall. I enjoy food halls. We just got one in Riverside, and I know they're popular in the coastal markets. If you're buying real estate and you've got a food mall, a food hall, different than a food mall. If you're not familiar with the concept, it's Joe Ritchie was on the panel of the Elm Restaurant Group, and a food hall versus a food court, he summed it up nicely. We still do it fast, but it's not $5 in 5 minutes. It's $15 for what you'd get for $30 in a sit-down restaurant with a nice cocktail. I think that's a really good way to describe it. So he estimates there's going to be 450 food halls opening up in the U.S. in the next few years, and he thinks that there will be failures related to operating models. Real estate investors, if you're in a market that has a food hall, I think it's a good sign. It means you've got, potentially bougie tenants or buyers. So you're probably in good shape. The National Home Builders did a forecast. Robert Dietz, he's been on a radio show before, talking about how builders are feeling. In short, they're frustrated. Regulation costs are on average 24 to 25% of projects, and 2/3 of that is directly tied to the land. I later asked him via Twitter if lawsuits are counted in that. So in states like California, we know it's not 25%, but in California, we've had several radio interviews talking about how lawsuits, CEQA lawsuits get tied up in court, and these builders are just, between the lawsuits and the amount of PR they have to do to get into the city councils and deal with the NIMBYs that don't want people to build, it's so expensive. And he said that there's no way for us to even calculate that. So the amount of money that builders are having to spend on regulations and lawsuits in California, politicians can talk about affordability all they want, but they're not serious about it. The only seriousness I've seen is the accessory dwelling unit conversation, and why we covered it so hard and why it's so interesting is that the state is regulating it to where the municipalities don't have a choice. Because what happens, we've seen in SB 50 where they were going to start building mid-rise and density along transportation corridors. It didn't pass again in California, where we're saying we're dying for affordable housing. That would have done it. But when it lands at the local level, nobody wants it in their neighborhood. The not in my backyarders. It's really frustrating. Affordability, it's just not possible, long story short. So the iBuyer panel, it featured Darren Shamo with OfferPad, Dodd Frazier with Opendoor, and Josh Swift of Zillow Group. This was one of the main reasons I wanted to head to Austin. Opendoor transacted 3,500 homes per month between the buy and sell side. Running numbers for California, which I did last week, Zillow has purchased 53, Redfin 349, Opendoor 435, and OfferPad around 100. It took me a very long time to scrap all this data together. But I expect those numbers to increase, and holy cow, they have gone nuts in the last 6 months. So I think 2019 is going to be the year that the iBuyers get taken seriously. Josh Swift with Zillow offers, this is not a fad. This is a fundamental shift, and I would agree. It was really interesting that Nick Bailey was on the I Survive Real Estate panel 2 years ago, and he's like, absolutely not. We're not going to buy real estate. And when you think about it now, it's a smart move. And I think Zillow and the Keller Williams of the world, those are the two that I'm most excited to watch because they have multiple exit strategies. I'm in a market. I have rentals where Opendoor is actively transacting, and I get the letters and I see the social media posts. Man, they are spending a ton of money, just millions of dollars on advertising. I have not gotten even though I'm in the markets, Zillow, Redfin, I haven't gotten anything from them. So their marketing is very different. When you do an address search on Zillow, on Google, Zillow and Redfin are typically the number 1 and number 2 spot. Realtor.com is typically number 3. Opendoor isn't showing up, and that's why they're having to spend so much on outside marketing and why they probably purchased openlisting.com. They just can't compete in the search engine optimization race. And if you are in a market that is taking Zillow offers or the iBuyer offers across the board for Redfin or Zillow, you're going to notice when you click on an address, the get offer, get all cash offer now button, it's displayed very prominently. So they've raised billions, these companies, over the last 24 months, and they are going in hard. Open Door buys homes from 100,000 to 500,000. That is not true in California. All these iBuyers are breaking all kinds of rules, and just looking at all the data of what they're buying in California as of last week, it doesn't make any damn sense to me. They are all over the map. Everything from 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom to 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, sometimes 20 minutes apart. It's really, really interesting. 45% of sellers choose a regular sale through Premier Agent, said Zillow. Open Door said 50% of their true sellers actually convert to their model. They didn't really describe further what a serious seller was, but it was interesting to hear that they have such a high close rate. Their iBuyer model says it covers 70% of homes in the U.S. So they're covering the Open Doors in quite a few markets at this point. Let's see. Anything else that I really interesting? OfferPad, I really liked, Darren. OfferPad, I've been following their work. They're one of the few iBuyers. Them and Redfin seem to be a little bit more willing to dig in and do the bigger rehabs, but OfferPad has the more serious numbers. They're not operating on super thin margins. It's still tight, but it makes a little bit more sense at what I'm looking at. They have been able to do a rental project in as little as 13 days, which is incredibly impressive because they're doing some nice rehabs, and both them and Redfin even go as far as doing professional staging. So they're competition. Zillow said that we're not home flippers. I don't see a lot of them going to go into historic areas, doing major rehabs, hoarder houses. I've talked to a few of them of being nice with real estate investors, but I haven't gotten much feedback from them. They're so focused on creating the right brand right now and working really hard to scale and working on efficiencies. Throwing us into the mix, probably not. Do I think there's a potential for them working with brands like HomeVestors? Absolutely. Let's see. What buyers really want? There was a panel talking about buyers and sellers, and the one takeaway I thought was interesting is that we keep building homes for the nuclear family of the 1950s, but 28% live alone, 25% are couples with no kids, 20% adults living with other adults, and 7% single parents. So the nuclear family is a very small portion of that. So I wonder why builders aren't building more things in that on those different categories. I don't know. Glenn Kelman, with the CEOs of Glenn Kelman, the CEO of Redfin, was there. He brought up a few different things. I really didn't understand the MLS until a few years ago when Bruce spoke at the MLS conference that happened to be in Orange County. So there's over 600 MLSs, independent MLSs nationwide still. It's down quite a bit because they've been merging. I don't know the exact number, but I didn't understand how that worked until that event. And he says it's really important for competition and information. The data business is an extremely hard business to be in, and he's really there for it. If you're not following the news, there's currently a class action lawsuit. He really believes that the buyer's agent commissions are going to start being disclosed at some point. And part of that is because the plaintiffs in this class action lawsuit is basically saying that because the MLS rules require commission sharing, buyers agents aren't having to compete on their rate, which would lower the cost for consumers if those things were disclosed. So in the lawsuit, it features Realogy, RE/MAX, Keller Williams, Home Services of America, and also the National Association of Realtors. And I get the sense that there's a feeling that they might lose. So that's going to be very interesting to watch. Redfin showed that New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and Chicago are the cities that lead out migration, so people leaving their states and cities. Phoenix, Sacramento, Atlanta, Austin, and Miami are the top destinations with the highest in-migration. Glenn said that the most liberal people in the U.S. can become up in arms as soon as multifamily project is proposed near their single-family homes. I found that very interesting, and we just witnessed that in California with SB 50 and the transportation corridor construction. I was really disappointed to see that not work. As far as the economy goes, I went to the International Builder Show this year. This year at the conference in Austin, they had Lawrence Yun. He is, of course, the economist with the National Association of Realtors. Let's see, Frank Notaft with CoreLogic. He used to be with Freddie Mac. And somebody from Trulia was there as well, and Realtor.com. I didn't take a lot away. It's sort of that whole, wait and see. Lawrence Yun said that the inverted yield curve, which was typically a good recession indicator, may fail this time. He said we're beginning to see an uplift in consumer confidence around buying. But red tape in the home building is really limiting what we can build, and we're looking at a housing shortage of 5 to 6 million units that may last more than 4 years. I'm trying to understand where they're getting that data, because here in California, what gets thrown around a lot is that we're 3 million housing units short. So I'm surprised that we're only 5 to 6 million. Are we really half that number or more than half that number of shortage? That would be interesting to find out. So I am doing research on that. But anyway, I thought I'd leave you with some of my biggest takeaways. I really enjoyed that event, and I'll be creating several different articles digging in deeper into some of those topics. Upcoming events that September 27th is going to be I Survived Real Estate, our 12th year. We are trying to finalize the panel right now, trying to create something a little bit more interesting on the technology front. And we will have an event up in San Jose this year. It's sort of a version of the Quadrant 4, investing in Quadrant 4, so in a booming market, but it's really going to be focused on creating value. So we're working on a module on design, how to do better design and compete in that space, because HGTV has ruined absolutely everything. We're going to do a mini update on accessory dwelling units. We are going to finally try to finalize a chapter on opportunity zones. We're working with an attorney and a CPA. We've just been waiting for the regulation to get as close to done as possible nationwide, so we can give you the correct information the first time instead of it changing. That's going to be held at SJREI at the beginning of September. So if you are so inclined, go up there, or if you are a member or a subscriber with us, you'll get access to that after. But of course, you'll get a discount if you'd like to attend live and ask all your juicy questions. Keep an eye on our website for upcoming events, and we hope to see you out and about. Thanks. The Norris Group originates and services loans in California and Florida under California DRE License 012-19911, Florida Mortgage Lender License 1577, and NMLS License 1623669. For more information on hard money lending, go to thenorrisgroup.com and click the Hard Money tab.
For more information on hard money loans and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For information on passive investing with trust deeds, visit tngtrustdeeds.com.